everyone. I'm really glad to be in your midst this afternoon to tell you my story. It starts with the part begins with ignorance. I am an Igbo and I grew up in the eastern region of Nigeria with my parents, grandmother, and siblings in our village. My father was the primogenitor of his mother, although not of the father, because my grandfather married three wives and my grandmother happened to be the second wife. My father attended primary education. He was an intelligent man, but unfortunately, he did not proceed to higher education because my grandfather hadn't enough money to permit him that. But he acquired training in the fashion field and became a professional tailor. He was very popular in our town with Kevin's tailoring service. I believe that this is where I inherited my passion for fashion. He refused to relocate to the city, even when he got opportunity, the chance to travel to abroad, Cotonou, with his friend Ifanye, because he did not want to leave his aged mother alone in the village when all his siblings had moved to town to search for daily bread. He had a passion for education, as did my mother and my grandmother, who did not even see the four walls of school. My dad made sure that his children, including his younger siblings, did further their education, no matter how much it could cost him. It was the same with my grandmother and my mother. I grew up in a real African home where respecting and caring for others was a rule. For example, when we saw a stranger, we ensured we showed respect by greeting him or her. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon, ma. We would help the elderly in the village who were in need. If we did not, we would receive a few strokes of cane as a corporal punishment. When we woke up in the morning, we would go and greet our parents, our uncles and aunties, wash our faces and hands, and take a chewing stick to brush our teeth. Well, toothpaste and toothbrushes were mainly used by well-to-do families then, before starting the daily chores or eating our breakfast. My parents taught us about caring and respecting people, no matter their color or background. There was a time a white man and his family visited my house to make a traditional cloth for a chieftaincy coronation, because my dad was to sew his chieftaincy cloth. I was very delighted. For the first time in my life, I was having a close contact with people of a different color. It was a fantastic feeling and moment. In fact, my friends all came around and were so enthusiastic to see our visitors. For them, for my friends, we were fortunate, we were privileged, and the most popular family for hosting white people. I thought that our white visitors came from a different planet. I touched them. I caressed them. I asked my dad, my father, so many questions. Were they on the same planet like us? How do they eat? How did they go to toilet? For sure, they did not use the latrine, the pit toilet that was common in the village like ours. What type of food do they eat on this planet? My dad smiled and replied, the life is not like that. We are all the same. They are like us. They do the same thing we do. They have the same parts of the body we have. The only thing that is different is the color. I remembered him telling me that black and white are the same because we have more that makes us similar than what separates us. I was ignorant, but I learned after my father explained. Yes, of course, we were not rich, but we were very comfortable and content with what we had. We could afford 3 square meals a day. Although I did not grow up in a family that could afford television during my childhood. Television was only found in the houses of very few well-to-do people who lived in the city. But could travel to their villages during the weekends or once in a month to spend holidays with their family. The television in those days was the black and white type. We had a neighbor, Papa Aike, who had a black and white television. He built a small cupboard for the telly and kept it locked when not in use. I could only go to watch television with my siblings by going to our neighbor, Papa Aike, when he came back for a weekend. The funny part of it was that my brothers and I, plus other children from the village, we are not allowed to enter the sitting room, sit on the floor and watch television until we could prove that we had washed ourselves. Else, we would watch through the window. So what my siblings and I used to do was wash our faces and legs. I used a cream called Stella Pomade or Udake to rub our faces until they sparkled and shone, so that the sparkling would be good enough proof that we were clean. We were blind from what was happening in the larger world. However, it did not affect my academic performance. At least, I was one of the best students in my time. My father had his office in front of our house, and he had many apprentices of up to 15 people at any one time who were learning how to make clothes. We could only listen to news or know what was happening in the world when my father came to the backyard with his small tick-tock radio. At times, we would not understand what was said because the antenna was easily affected by a slight breeze. We would see my father twisting the antenna in order to refine the station. By the time he could come back to it, the news had finished. On one occasion, when I was 8, at 8 p.m., we were all in the kitchen as usual, waiting for my mother to finish cooking so that we could have our dinner. As was the normal routine, my dad, grandmother, and other siblings were all in the kitchen listening to the news and stories from my grandmother and father. My dad told us that Pope John Paul II would visit Nigeria. That was what was said in the news. We were very surprised and excited to hear that Pope John Paul II would visit Nigeria. As a child, I believed that Pope John Paul was a powerful man of God who would say anything and it happened. I, therefore, believed that he had the ability to say whatever he wanted and it would surely happen, almost like a genie. I had always loved my father to own an upstairs building. That was my dream. For me, those that owned upstairs were the richest. I thought that since the Pope was coming to Nigeria, it would be an opportunity for us to own our own upstairs and be in the list of the richest families in our village. I asked my dad, my father, if the Pope could do miracles. And my father answered, yes, of course. I jumped up. I was so excited. Everybody started looking at me as if I were deranged. Mpa, this is an opportunity then. My father said, what opportunity? Nah. We should invite Pope John Paul II to come to the house. He would make our downstairs to be upstairs and we would become one of the richest families in our village. My siblings, all of them shouted, true, true, true. My father said, oh, it doesn't work that way. Yes, the Pope can make miracles, but at times this type of miracle you are asking for is hard to come by. I was disappointed. I was sad. My dreams vanished. In my thought, we would not be rich anymore. It's hard, I said. In this case, I was also ignorant by thinking that the Pope could or would perform a miracle of converting my house to upstairs. This is because there was no occasion for me to know until occasion came by and my father equipped me with the knowledge. If I did not ask, I would not have learned that the Pope was an ordinary person like us, ordinary person like you and I. I was ignorant, but I learned. On a different occasion, as a little kid, we attended Sunday school. They mentioned some of the names in the Bible: Roman Empire, Israel, Damascus, Syria, Palestinian, and others. Nkechi was convinced that these countries were not on earth. They could only be found in heaven. When I came back, I shared with my dad, my father, my amazing discoveries. Wow! Our teacher said that she would go on pilgrimage in Israel, which means he was going to see God in heaven, as Nkechi said. My dad smiled and told me, no, Israel is on earth here. It is not in heaven. Nkechi was ignorant. She did not have the opportunity to know that those countries could be on earth until I let her know that when I found out from my father. She was ignorant, but she learned. We admit ignorance in children. We find it disarming, cute, innocent. But ignorance has an ugly world in adulthood. It sounds like a choice you have made to not have knowledge. It sounds like you have turned your back on understanding. When I got married, I moved to Italy to join my husband. He introduced me to a client of his, a lady who was so beautiful, very rich. This lady loved him so much and had always sent him gifts. She was so excited to see me when my husband informed her that I have got a visa and would be joining him soon. When I came to Italy, she visited us in our apartment. She promised to take me around the world on any holiday. During one summer, she invited me to her house in the mountains with her family. My husband was traveling to Nigeria. I dressed up in my smartest short jeans with white canvas. I wore an expensive designer wristwatch that my husband had bought for me. When I arrived, her body language changed when she saw me with my watch. She was surprised to see that I looked very smart. She asked me to show her my watch. I showed her my wristwatch innocently. She asked if it was original. I said yes, it was. She said, wow, that's an expensive wristwatch, you know. How could your husband afford such an expensive wristwatch? I looked at her and smiled. She asked if we owned houses in Africa, if African people could own houses. I smiled and replied, no. In fact, we live on top of trees, and every morning we jump from one tree to the other. The next thing she said was, Davero, is it true? I did know she did not mean any bad. She was only being ignorant, regardless of how rich she was. For her, all the news she had heard about black people was that black people were incapacitated, poor, native, living a different existence to her own. We all can be ignorant, no matter your level of education, no matter how rich you are, no matter how powerful your family background is. In my language, we say, enweghị onye macha ihe niile. Nobody knows it all. We can learn. We only need to understand that black or white is only a color, and teach our children from early age that black is only a color. Black is not incapacitating. Teaching them from a young age will improve the way black people are being perceived. We all are ignorant, but we can learn. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Bye.